These flashcards cover Article 1, General Provisions of AIA Document A201, 2017, General Conditions of the Contract. The purpose of these flashcards are to serve as a study resource for NCARB ARE 5.0 exams. Good luck! Basic definitions. The contract documents. The contract documents are enumerated in the agreement between the owner and the contractor. Conditions of the contract, drawings, specifications, addenda issued prior to execution of the contract, other documents listed in the agreement, and modifications issued after the execution of the contract. A modification is 1. A written amendment to the contract signed by both parties, 2. A change order, 3. A construction change directive, or 4. A written order for a minor change in the work issued by the architect. Unless specifically enumerated in the agreement, the contract documents do not include the advertisement or invitation to bid, instructions to bidders, sample forms, other information furnished by the owner in anticipation of receiving bids or proposals, the contractor's bid or proposal, or portions of addenda related to bidding or proposal requirements. The contract. The contract documents form the contract for construction. The contract represents the entire and integrated agreement between the parties hereto and supersedes prior negotiations, representations, or agreements either written or oral. The contract may be amended or modified only by a modification. The contract documents shall not be construed to create a contractual relationship of any kind. 1. Between the contractor and the architect or the architect's consultant. 2. Between the owner and a subcontractor or a subcontractor. 3. Between the owner and the architect or the architect's consultant. Or 4. Between any persons or entities other than the owner and the contractor. The architect shall, however, be entitled to perform and enforcement of obligations under the contract intended to facilitate performance of the architect's duties. The work. The term work means the construction and services required by the contract documents, whether completed or partially completed, and includes all other labor, materials, equipment, and services provided to or to be provided by the contractor to fulfill the contractor's obligations. The work may constitute the whole or a part of the project. The project. The project is the total construction of which the work performed under the contract documents may be the whole or a part of which may include construction by the owner and by separate contractors. The drawings. The drawings are the graphic and pictorial portions of the contract documents showing the design, location, and dimensions of the work, generally including plans, elevations, sections, details, schedules, and diagrams. The specifications. The specifications are that portion of the contract documents consisting of the written requirements for materials, equipment, systems, standards and workmanship for the work, and performance of related services. Instruments of service. Instruments of service are representations in any medium of expression now known or later developed of the tangible or intangible creative work performed by the architect and the architect's consultants under their respective professional services agreements. Instruments of service may include, without limitation, studies, surveys, models, sketches, drawings, specifications, and other similar materials. Initial decision maker. Initial decision maker is the person identified in the agreement to render initial decisions on claims in accordance with sections 15.2. The initial decision maker shall not show partiality to the owner or contractor and shall not be liable for results of interpretations or decisions rendered in good faith. Correlation and intent of the contract documents. The intent of the contract documents is to include all items necessary for the proper execution and completion of the work by the contractor. The contract documents are complementary, and what is required by one shall be as binding as if required by all. Performance by the contractor shall be required only to the extent consistent with the contract documents and reasonably inferable from them as being necessary to produce the intended results. The invalidity of any provisions of the contract documents shall not invalidate the contract or its remaining provisions. If it is determined that any provision of the contract documents violates any law or is otherwise invalid or unenforceable, then that provision shall be revisited to the extent necessary to make that provision legal and enforceable. In such case, the contract documents shall be construed to the fullest extent permitted by law, to give effect to their parties' intentions and purposes in executing the contracts. Organization of the specifications into divisions, sections, and articles, and arrangement of drawings shall not control the contractor in dividing the work among subcontractors or its establishing the extent of work to be performed by any trade. Unless otherwise stated in the contract documents, words that have well-known technical and construction industry meanings are used in the contract documents in accordance with such recognized meanings. Capitalization. Terms capitalized in these general conditions include those that are 1. Specifically defined, 2. The titles of numbered articles, or 3. The titles of other documents published by the American Institute of Architects. Interpretation. In the interest of brevity, the contract documents frequently omit modifying words such as all and any, and articles such as the and an, but the fact that a modifier or an article is absent from one statement and appears in another is not intended to affect the interpretation of either statement. Ownership and use of drawings, specifications, and other instruments of service. The architect and architect's consultants shall be deemed the authors and owners of their respective instruments of service, including the drawings and specifications, and retain all common law, statutory, and other reserved rights in their instruments of service, including copyrights. The contractor, subcontractors, sub-subcontractors, and suppliers shall not own or claim a copyright in instruments of service. Submittal or distribution to meet official regulatory requirements or for other purposes in connection with the project is not to be construed as publication in derogation of the architect's or architect's consultants' reserved rights. The contractor, subcontractors, sub-subcontractors, and suppliers are authorized to use and reproduce the instruments of service provided to them, subject to any protocols established pursuant to sections 1.7 and 1.8, solely and exclusively for the execution of the work. All copies made under this authorization shall bear the copyright notice, if any, shown on the instruments of service. The contractor, subcontractor, sub-subcontractors, and suppliers shall not use the instruments of service on other projects or for additions to the project outside of the scope of the work without that specific written consent of the owner, architect, and architect's consultants. Notice. Except as otherwise provided in section 1.6.2, where the contract documents require one party to notify or give notice to the other party, such notice shall be provided in writing to the designated representative of the party to whom the notice is addressed and shall be deemed to have been duly served if delivered in person, by mail, by courier, or by electronic transmission if a method for electronic transmission is set forth in the agreement. Notice of claim as provided in section 15.1.3 shall be provided in writing and shall be deemed to have been duly served only if delivered to the designated representative of the party to whom the notice is addressed by certified or registered mail, or the courier providing proof of delivery. Digital data use and transmission. The parties shall agree upon protocols governing the transmission and use of instruments of service or any other information or documentation in digital form. The parties will use AIA Document 203-2013, Building Information Modeling and Digital Data Exhibit, to establish the protocols for the development, use, transmission, and exchange of digital data. Building Information Models, Use and Reliance. Any use of or reliance on all or a portion of a building information model without agreement to protocols governing the use of and reliance on the information contained in the model and without having those protocols set forth in AIA document E203-2013, Building Information Modeling and Digital Data Exhibit, and the requisite AIA document G202-2013, Project Building Information Modeling Protocol form, shall be at the using or relying party's sole risk and without liability to the other party and its contractor or consultants, the authors of and contributors to the building information model, and each of their agents and employees.